Good day, everybody. I'm Stefano Conti from Parma, Italy, and today I'd like to share with you kind of a new concept in achieving natural aesthetics with implants. And anytime we think about a natural aesthetic, we want less invasiveness and more aesthetics. And well, anytime we think about implants as well, and aesthetic with implants, we should think about the form. Missing the tooth, we've been missing the bone and then soft tissue. So form to me means bone, the amount of bone we've been missing after the extraction. And we should know how to manipulate and manage the bone. But even more importantly, we should know how to manipulate the soft tissue. And third aspect, which is extremely important, is the aspect of components. Which components we can utilize in order to manipulate the soft tissue. So the implant, which kind of implant design, which kind of abutment, and which kind of prosthetic contour and material we can utilize in order to achieve a predictable final outcome. So the implant design is fundamental in order to understand the right implant placement, the depth of the implant placement as well, morphology, size and surface of the implant. So if you look at the contemporary scenario today, how can we achieve a crestal bone stability? Not all the implants are the same, so we have to summarize two implant design factors that can affect the bone stability. One is the micro gap and the polished neck of the implant. With the micro gap, we have bacterial contamination. Depending on the size and the stability of the implant abutment connection, we have microbial leakage. But on the other side, when we think about the polished neck, we know that we should never place the polished neck below the bone level, right? So we have to think like this when anytime we place the implant, depending on the design. We also have implant design with the bone level implant concept. And also we have tissue level implant. So depending on the design, we should know which is the ideal placement of the implant. All right. So we have bone level implant with the or without platform switching, and we have transmucosal implant with a polished, mirror polished neck. But even more importantly, we have biologic factors. And when I think and tell you about the biologic factors, I mean the soft tissue thickness. What do I mean with that? Well, anytime we place the implant, we should know the crestal soft tissue thickness. The ideal crestal soft tissue thickness would be 4 millimeters. At 3 millimeters is acceptable in order to recreate the supracrestal tissue attachment, right? After the loading of the implant, we create the supracrestal tissue attachment. I'll give you an example now. Is a bone level implant, is a premium implant from Sveden and Martina. So the prosthetic workflow can be very long, but at the end of the day, the implant is only a little part of it. And when we place the implant, we should know exactly the ideal positioning of the implant. How can we utilize the implant, right? So the case is quite simple from an aesthetic point of view. We have to place an implant in position 21, but the implant design is going to affect the crestal bone stability. So we should know exactly the positioning of the implant. And we've been utilizing a premium one with a UTM neck. At the time, we had this implant with a 0.8 millimeters of UTM neck. And we did place the implant at the bone level, in the right, from a prosthetic point of view and biologic point of view, in the right place. Okay, 2 millimeters of bone on the buccal, at least 1.5 millimeters to the neighboring teeth, and a huge amount of soft tissue around. So we place the implant at the bone level, and the case, after the load of the implant with the provision, we just have to wait. We just recreate the ideal gingival architecture around the neighboring teeth and the implant, and we get to the final outcome, which is unpredictability. But why we get such a good result? Because we have a huge amount of soft tissue that we can work with, that we can manipulate. Why we get to the final outcome like this? Because we have a right amount of bone as well. So crestal bone stability depends on the implant design, the way we place and utilize the implant, but depends also, of course, on the soft tissue thickness. So we have a crestal tissue thickness, and in the same way we have supracrestal tissue attachment. Okay? So if you look at this, then we understand that bone level implants work very well, of course, but we got limitations. At the end of the day, we got a final outcome. After 4 years, the bone is still there, but it's an ideal case. And when we're dealing with ideal cases, it's very easy. But what about the reality now? What about Prama? Well, I'm utilizing Prama, the intramucosal implant, because the reality is different. In reality, every day on Monday morning, we have cases like this when we don't have a bundle bone, a very thin bundle bone, and after distraction, maybe we're scared, we are going to lose all the buccal plates, right? Or we have cases like this where we already lost all the buccal plate. So we have to make a decision, which is the right surgical approach. Place the implant, or wait, or do bone regeneration, GBR, whatever. Connective tissue graft. Well, of course, for big defects, we should think like this. But when we're dealing with very little defects, 2-3 millimeters, then we have to think we can avoid a surgical approach, and we get through a minimal invasive approach without surgical. So little defect, poor thin mucosa around the dentulous ridge. Well, what can we do? So this is the way Prama works. This is the real battlefield of Prama. And every day we have cases like this. Okay? So when I think like this, I think in reality the real advantage of Prama implant with the UTM neck. And after the extraction in a fresh socket, for example, how can I be sure I can maintain the bundled bone on the buccal? How can I be sure that I won't have a contraction on the buccal aspect? Well, I will show you now in the next. After the premium, we go to the P slim, and then in the big family on the Prama. In the big family of Prama, we have the intramucosal concept. And I will try to explain to you very shortly what I mean with that. We have the neck. It can be 2.8 millimeters for the Prama, and in the neck we have a specific UTM surface, ultra thin treated microsurface. And well, with the UTM neck, we can really achieve beautiful outcome with ease and predictability. Why? Because we can place the neck into the bone, and as you can see in the slide, we have an osteoblastic front. That means that we have osseointegration of the neck. But also, even more importantly, when the neck is out of the bone, according to the potential entropic potential concept, we can actually have, and as you can see in the human histology at 6 months, we can have beautiful soft tissue around the neck of the implant, which is the natural barrier for the implant and the bone to the external world. So if we think like this and we focus on the neck, we see the convergent profile of the intramucosal, which is nice because the myofibroblasts migrate towards to the narrowest diameter. And in the same time, the circular fibers, they find an ideal situation with the UTM surface, and they get attached to the neck and working together with the perpendicular one. So we have a thick connective tissue all around the neck. Again, we have a biological seal. According to that, and if you look at the big family of Prama, I'm going to show you now how to utilize the implant. Okay? And we have to think different. Think about a normal case on the distal area. We have a little defect. Should we place the implant deeper, or we can place the implant exactly where it's supposed to be, with the implant abutment connection 2 to 4 millimeters from the ideal gingival margin? Yes, we can. So we have a biological seal because the micro gap is far from the bone. And then in this part of the neck which is exposed, we have all the connective tissue around, the sealing the implant and the bone from the external world. So it's going to be like this. If you look at this from this point, from this perspective, it's going to be a very minimal invasive approach. And again, we have a vertical platform switching. So the gap, of course, is important. The connection is important, but not as much as when we use a bone level implant. We have a vertical platform switching. The gap is far from the bone. And again, we can go through digital as well, of course. We can work on digital and we can create the margin of the crown also on the neck for specific cases when needed, because the neck of the implant is part, it can be part of the abutment. It's like one piece. So we can decide which is exactly the level of the crown margin in order to achieve a beautiful aesthetic. And that's what we do. Digitally, we decide according to the aesthetic need, which is the final positioning of the margin of my crown. So it's quite interesting. We have lots of advantages if we think like this. It's a complete different perspective, right? And we can work with the freedom from a surgical and prosthetic point of view to decide which is the ideal situation for each clinical situation. And again, what I can achieve with an intramucosal implant? Well, I'll show you a few cases. Compromised site after the extraction. We had infection on the central lateral incisor. And as you can see, we have a big defect. So, which is the best avenue? Should I extract the tooth, wait a few months, then maybe go through bone regeneration? Or utilize another concept of implant, another design of implant? After the extraction, I have 6 millimeters of defects on the buccal. And I have to decide what to do. And as you can see, the neck of the implant is completely exposed, far from the bone. But I'm not scared because it's going to work. Both on the bone, if part of it is into the bone, and both for the soft tissue, because we got the UTM surface. So I just need to keep the volume of the space maintaining, wherever it is, space maintaining defect with biomaterials, and just have to wait. And after a few months, slowly, I can see that my implant is working well. I'm not following the bone anymore. I'm not going through the bone regeneration for this kind of defect. I'm just working with the UTM neck of the Prama implant. As you can see, after a few months, my soft tissue, peri-implant soft tissue, is already done, ready to get to the final prosthetics. And the question again is, how deep is bone below gingiva? Well, I don't really care anymore, because I know where I see the abutment connection, I know that apical to this area, I still have 1-2 millimeters of soft tissue surrounding the neck and creating the biological seal. And when we see the custom model, the gypsum custom model, as you can see, the free gingival, the ideal gingival margin is 4 millimeters to the implant abutment connection. So I'm still working from a prosthetic point of view and placing the implant in the right place from a prosthetic point of view, which is amazing because I'm a prosthodontic. I was born as a prosthodontic, but then I found that placing implant was very easy, so I decided more than 15 years ago to place implants. And now with the Prama, it's too easy for me. So I have to deal with the subcritical contour. I have to deal with the critical contour, the sealing zone. What is the sealing zone? I don't need to think like that anymore, because to me the sealing zone is apical to the implant abutment connection. It's the biological seal. And I feel much confident like this, much more. So, one abutment, one time. For what? I can I can place and remove the crown as many times as I want. This is not a problem because I'm not harming the soft tissue around the implant, because the real biological seal is apical to that. So anytime I remove the crown, I reposition the crown, I can really work with my prosthetic. I might modify the emergence profile of the crown, both on temporaries and then final crown, without harming the quality of the peri-implant soft tissue, which is an amazing advantage. As you can see, after a few months, I didn't like the gingival architecture. I just removed the crown. I made my prosthetic work on the crown, and I will show you the next. Here, the critical contour, I've been modifying after a few months the critical contour. And if I do that, what's going to happen? Nothing. I still have the beautiful neck. It's going to seal, create a biological seal for the implant. So I'm confident that nothing is going to bother the peri-implant soft tissue. So if I think like this, I can really do what I want, not just in the temporary, but also in the final crown. In after years, I can still remove it, and I can make my prosthetic work in order to optimize the gingival architecture. Again, after few months, the gingival level is adapting on the landing zone of my emergent profile of the crown. 4 months, 6 months, and again, you can do this digitally without any problems. And one more case to end my presentation. Another case, which is a compromised site. I have to extract the 11th, and of course, I have the bone and the soft tissue, which are not ideal anymore. What should I do? Well, as you can see in the tomography, we have to think very, very, very careful what we can do here in order not to compromise the final outcome. But again, I'm confident with Prama. After the extraction, I have to worry about the ideal positioning of the implant in the fresh socket. That's what I do with the Prama, and I can work and decide which is exactly the level I want to place my implant abutment connection, without being so worried of the bone, on the bundle bone, on the buccal side, because I'm working with 2.8 millimeters of advantages. That's what I do. I place my implant in the right position from a prosthetic and biologic point of view, and I just have to wait. So after a few months, I can remove the the temporary crown before getting into the final. And as you can see, this is the peri-implant soft tissue. But I can still modify the peri-implant soft tissue without harming the quality of the peri-implant soft tissue. This is what I do. I'm working prosthetically, and with my technicians, I can create the new abutment, zirconia abutment. And of course, with the emergence profile of my abutment, I can really affect and manipulate the soft tissue, both on the central incisor natural tooth and on the implant. So I can create an anatomical situation which is identical for both teeth, for the 11th and 21. It's much easier for us to work like this as prosthodontics. This is the finals. We get to the finals, and on the custom model, we can actually work recreating the ideal gingival architecture, because we know that we can actually work prosthetically to modulate and manipulate the soft tissue in order to recreate a symmetrical gingival architecture. This is what we do with ease and predictability. We get to the final outcome very, very easily with a very minimal invasive approach. As you can see, at the end of the day, we got nice results without thinking too much about the surgical approach, without thinking too much about the final implant positioning. And what about the adherence zone? What about the plaque zone? Yes, they are important. We have to think about that. But with the Prama, we know that apical to this area, we still have the biologic seal, which is, to me, again, the natural barrier for the implant to the external world. And I feel much, much confident like this. So we can remove the crown, we can wash it with chlorhexidine, we can place the chlorhexidine gel, and we can place it again anytime we want, without affecting, without harming the quality of the peri-implants of tissue. So this is the final case. And on the palatal side as well. So why Prama again? After a few years, you can see the final outcome is still beautiful. But why Prama though? Well, the first and the unique intramucosal implant. And again, we have a lot of advantages: surgical, biological, prosthetic advantages. We have again the vertical freedom to place the implant at different levels. We have a vertical platform switching. That means that the microgap is far from the bone. And again, apical to the microgap, we have the biologic seal, which is important for a long-term success of the implant. And then we have an ideal implant placement, 3D implant placement, from a prosthetic but also biologic point of view. So I think to utilize Prama is a way to be not only the first but the unique in this kind of approach. And I really love it. So thank you very much.